There we go. Sir.
Yeah, what do the grades on our reading reports mean?
Oh, what do the grades of the reading reports mean? There were 10 points. So, 10, if you got all 10, then you got 100%. And if you got 8, you got 80%. And the reading reports themselves, each one is worth some percentage of your grade, which I specified on the requirement sheet and cannot at this moment in my extremely sleep-deprived state recollect. I don't remember what. But it's some, overall, all 4 reading reports, 30% of your grade, something like that. This will require higher math by Katie and me at the end of the semester. But so if you don't do as well as you thought you should have on any one reading report, that's not the end of the world. If you didn't do too hot on both of these, you might want to do a better job on the last one, since you've just handed in the third one. And do a better job on the question sets. I am very impressed with improvement. I am very unimpressed with its opposite. So don't coast, but take heart. So if you didn't do as well as you'd like, just keep doing better. Are there other questions? While the Greeks in the 10th and the 9th and the 8th centuries BCE are slowly crawling out of the dark ages following the dissolution of the Mycenaean world at the end of the 12th century BCE. Over here in what we think of today as the Middle East, but what scholars of antiquity call the Near East, it's the same region, the Near East, was a land of succeeding empires, one empire after another, very large empires. And in the era of the Greek geometric period, while there were these small villages and incipient cities and slowly growing landed aristocracies, the Assyrian Empire was the big game in town. They were the largest empire in the Western world at this time. And in the 9th century, when the wealthy woman's amphora and the warrior guys' amphora burials were in Athens. In the 9th century, the Assyrians, who are based in what is essentially today Kurdistan, northern Iraq, expanded to capture the southern part of Mesopotamia, which was a competitive empire, Babylonia, and then proceeded over the course of the 8th and the early 7th centuries to capture more and more peoples, more and more kingdoms, and to move people around quite a bit. When the Assyrians captured a place, they tended to deport large sections of the population, not absolutely everybody, but all the people who had money and land and power, so that there would not be any base for rebellion after their soldiers left. So over the course of the 8th century, they captured the cities and their larger regions in Syria, and then in the coastal areas, the inland areas of Syria and the coastal areas of Syria, and then by the middle of the 8th century, they had captured the biblical kingdoms of Israel and eventually the southern parts of Israel there, Philistia. And the Egyptian pharaoh Psammetichus was starting to get pretty nervous about them. And as well he should have been, because pretty soon they captured Egypt as well. But in advance of that, Psammetichus decided that he would strengthen his armies. And so he hired mercenaries. And the available mercenaries in the 7th century were Greeks. They were all these folks here who were just well out of range of the Assyrians, and not at the moment unusually fighting each other, so they were available for hire. And in order to keep the Greeks in his kingdom occupied and happy, he allowed them to establish a city of their own. And that city was Naucratis, which was established in the Egyptian Delta in the 7th century BCE. So Greeks, both from the mainland of Greece and from what's known as East Greece, Ionia, moved to Egypt. And like everybody who has ever gone to Egypt, they were very impressed. They were very impressed. They were impressed by all sorts of things, just the way everybody is who goes to Egypt. Of course, at the time that the Greeks went to Egypt and, for example, saw the pyramids were well over 2,000 years old. So they were older than anybody could possibly imagine. They were certainly older than any stories that the Greeks had. And they would have been exceptionally impressed by two aspects that are so obvious that it's easy to take them for granted or to overlook them. One is the size, and we already have seen that on that list of aspects of Greek culture that we have observed. By now, size mattered to them. They liked big. They thought Monumental was good. They were impressed with Monumental. They went after that when they could. So the size of the monuments that they saw in Egypt were very impressive. And the fact that these monuments were built of giant pieces of stone, that was very impressive, because the Greeks were impressed by size, but unable to do very much with it, unable to build with it, because they didn't have the specific tools and the specific training to work stone of this size. That's one of the reasons that Iron Age Greeks were so impressed with Cyclopean walls when they saw them. They couldn't imagine how anybody would have built these things. They themselves didn't have the tools to do that. We know that Greeks traveled throughout Egypt, just the way people do now. So the pyramids are not too far away from Naucratis, up in the delta in what's called Lower Egypt, in the northern part of Egypt. Greeks would have gone down the Nile to, for example, the temple complex at Karnak. This is the temple complex at Karnak. And just like these tourists, they would have been dwarfed by and absolutely dazzled by the monumental colonnaded halls that they would have seen inside these temples. And that, would have made their own puny little sanctuaries seem not really sufficient any longer. Now, the reason that the buildings that Greeks were constructing for their deities inside sanctuaries in the 8th and the 7th century were the size they were is because the materials that they were building with were very lightly worked stone that they could make foundations with, mud brick that they could build the upper stories, the upper part of the wall with, wood for the beams and the ceilings. And so the size of a structure that they could build for a deity in a sanctuary was circumscribed by the extent to which those materials could be used. And here you see a section drawing of one of the houses from Zagara, just to give you a reminder of the very, very human scale that was required by the materials that they had to hand, wood and stone. So beams, which you could only make of a certain width or length, and therefore only span a certain width opening. So all these many sanctuaries, and this again is a map, all these dots are sanctuaries that existed in the Greek world by the 7th century, what are the essential elements of a sanctuary? Pedley talks about this in the reading that you were assigned. What are the essential elements of a sanctuary? 2 essential elements. An altar. An altar is one essential element. What's the other? Nope. The guest down here was a cult statue, and that's absolutely not an essential element. We start to get them after a while, but how do you know when you've entered a sanctuary? What is a sanctuary essentially? Essentially, what is it? Sacred area. It's just an area. Space. It's a sacred space. How do you know when you've entered a sacred space? Yeah. What would that boundary be? How?
Enclosing element, like architecture.
An enclosing element. I mean, we think of an enclosing element as a wall, but really it's something that delineates the space, some sort of perimeter area. In Greek, that sacred space that is so delineated is called a temenos. Temenos, temenos. And so the most fundamental thing you need is a temenos. That is, you need something that delineates unsacred space, regular space, from sacred space. And then in the sacred space, the very first thing that you need is an altar. So all these sanctuaries grow up in the Greek world, and in the 9th and the 8th and the 7th centuries, they are all delineated, and they all have altars. But they do not all have buildings, because they don't need a building. You don't need a building. But in the 7th century, and especially towards the end of the 7th century, some sanctuaries in the Greek world start to get buildings, and you read about this, I hope, in your book. So you read about some of these early 7th century sanctuaries and buildings, the little structure at the Argive Horion, Eretria, Dreros, Prinias, and so on. But there aren't really a lot of those structures. But by the end of the 7th century, what happens is that the Greeks who have been to Egypt transmit back home the wherewithal, the knowledge, and they pick up some tools too, to build impressive homes for their deities. And that's what we know of as temples. So temples are late to come to the Greek religious space. A temple is not the first and foremost thing in a sanctuary. It's an add-on. It's a fancy add-on that is made possible in the Greek temples in the way we know them by the know-how that the Greeks pick up from Egypt. And what you see in these temples, these early temples, is most especially the aspect of Egyptian sites that was most singularly impressive, and that's the columns. And the earliest of the temples have monolithic columns, just similar to what the Greeks would have seen in Egypt. So here, for example, Temple of Apollo at Corinth, these are monolithic columns. All of the architectural niceties, the details of which you can read about in John Pedley's book, the capitals, the architrave, and then the specific sorts of frieze courses on the top, the two orders, Doric and Ionic, are decorative translations from wood and mud brick and clay into stone. So they are simply formal decorative developments. It's not necessary to have these capitals at the top of a column. You could just have a straight shaft holding up the architrave. But as long as they were at it, they made all these decorative additions. Okay. The other thing that the Greeks do with this newfound know-how, they're the tools for working hard stone, pounders and abrasives, and the iron tools, the chisels, and the points, is start to make sculpture. We have the development of monumental sculpture, and by monumental I mean larger than life size, in the 7th century, at exactly the time that we know that the Greeks were traveling to Egypt. We have two sorts of sculpted forms, ladies and men. The ladies are called, if you have one lady, she's called a kouroi. If you have more than one lady, if you have a bunch of ladies, you have kouroi, K-O-R-A-I. That's the plural of kouroi. So you see here a kouroi that was left in the quarry on the island of Thera because I guess either somebody never finished her or she cracked or something like that. And what you can see from this photograph is that she's essentially a plank. She's carved. Really, she's conceived and carved in 2 dimensions. She's just basically cut flat, and then the details lay on top of her. They just are carved on top of her, and that is what Nicandry is like. Nicandry, who we already met from the island of Delos on the dedication, is, when you look at her in side view, just this skinny 2D plank. In fact, you can see that what Greek sculptors have done here, what the Greek artists have done here, is conceive in very, very larger than life form, and in stone, a gigantic version of a drawing. Like, for example, here on the Analatos painter's amphora, you see these people, when they turn sideways, they disappear practically. They get very skinny. They only have width when you see them frontally. There's really something the matter here. This artist was very challenged and did not rise to the challenge. But you know that when you're conceiving, when you're drawing only in 2 dimensions, that kind of 3-dimensionality poses a challenge to you. So Nicandry is just a large version of one of these ladies on a 7th century amphora. But sometime toward the end of the 7th century, somebody or bodies of the Greeks in Egypt learned how to carve monumental figures in 3 dimensions from the Egyptians. Now, of course, you have to put yourself in the mind of a Greek who lands in Egypt, and you want to remember that list of cultural attributes that we like. One of the things that Greeks like is the human figure. They've gotten very interested in that. They like depictions of people, of themselves, essentially. So, in addition to the monumentalness and the working in stone that Greeks would have seen when they went to Egypt, these very, very large figures that they would have seen would have attracted their attention. That would have been very impressive. They would have been interested to know how Egyptians carved those figures. Well, Egyptian sculpture comes in 2 varieties, but only 1 technique. The 2 varieties are relief, like you see here, and sculpture in the round. But both relief and sculpture in the round work the same way, which is to say that in both cases, whether it was relief, in which case you did this only on 1 surface, or in the round, in which case you did this on 4 surfaces of a big block, an Egyptian sculptor put a grid of 21 units from the eye line to the soles of the feet. So 23 all the way to the top of the head. And if they had a block that was, if they wanted to make a sculpture that was in the round, you took a block, and on each face of the block, on all 4 faces, they'd draw this grid. And then they'd drill in at certain points and then be able to carve out on each face the figure, and then chisel away all of the extra. And that's how they made a sculpture in the round. And that's what the Greeks learned how to do, exactly from the Egyptians. So this fine fellow, Mentuemet, who we know the date of because he has an inscription that dates him 600. He's a little on the short side, 5'6". And this fine fellow, who probably comes from Attica, but is called the New York kouros because he now resides in the Metropolitan Museum in New York, and that's where he has resided for quite a long time, and it's not precisely clear where he came from originally. So he's called the New York kouros. So the New York kouros has, in many respects, an identical appearance to Mentuemet. What's the same? Quick, write down, quick, all the things that are the same. Okay, tell me something that's the same. The way that the hands are clenched at the sides. Something else.
They're not wearing shoes.
Yeah, they're barefoot. Something else.
They're both stepping forward with their left foot.
The left foot is forward. Exactly. Something else.
Big eyes.
Yeah, their facial features are, the eyes are especially pronounced in their facial features. One of the reasons is that the eyes were one of the key points in the proportions of the face. So the eyes were emphasized. What else? Something else?
Eyebrows.
Yep, right, the eyebrows. Well, actually the eyebrows are, well, they have them. I mean, I guess you could say that is similar. These are really just like arcs. But yeah, something else. Yeah, actually, right. In fact, the left leg is forward. It would really be great if everybody could get up and try this. This is not so simple. The left leg is forward. The right leg is vertical, and the heel is flat on the floor, flat on the ground. So the left leg gives you the idea that the figure is moving, is walking. But you are not walking if you're doing this. You're not, nor are you standing in a very comfortable position, or a normal position. This is not even a normal relaxed position. This is difficult to do for any length of time. If you're in movement, your heel is up off the ground, your leg is certainly not vertical, your knee's not locked. Any exercise teacher will tell you that. That's not okay. So that is strange, and it's just an affectation, and that's of course along with the clenched hands and the grid. That is one of the features that really locks in the proof that the kouroi, the boy statues, were developed based on the Egyptian model, because why would two different people come up with such a impractical, wacky way to do things? Okay, other things that are the same? Anything else that's the same?
The hands are connected at the hip.
Yes, they are. The hands are connected at the hip in both cases, and the reason is the same in both cases, because the sculptors are afraid that if they disconnect them, the arms will break off, that it'll be too loose. So they're a little worried about their carving.
Similar physical shaping of the chest.
Yes. The shoulders and the chest, very, very similar. And of course, that's because you can actually practically see the original block. So you can really see the outlines of the rectangle.
They're both standing on a base.
They're both on a base. Yep, they're both on a base. They're not freestanding, in other words. They're locked onto a base. They are not smiling. Mm-hmm. Yes, they're these early ones are serious. So the hair is weird, eh? The hair is weird in both of them. It's not hair-like. When I was a college student, and actually also when I got my PhD, John Pedley was my teacher. And as you might have been able to tell from his book, he loves sculpture. So we had lecture after lecture about these kouroi. And there are a lot of them, like over 100. And it was challenging to try to tell them all apart, because as you may have noticed, they're very similar. And one of the ways that a friend of mine and I, sitting in the back, whispering to each other all the time, used to tell them apart was by the hair. So the New York chorus has Tootsie Roll hair. Some of them have crinkle-cut French fry hair. They have different sorts of hair. So, but the hair is, in other words, not hair-like. It's not like hair. It's just some weird pattern, and that's what. And the wig on Metu Emet is this, weird patterned thing, and that's what the New York chorus has too. He has a little diadem. Of course, they have practically everything in common. Also, size. Well, the New York chorus is a little bit taller than Metu Emet. He's about 6 feet tall, but he's the exact same grid, as you can see. But of course, the biggest difference, there's one great big difference, so obvious that I will not bother to ask you. I'll just confirm what you've already noticed, which is that the Greek guys don't have any clothes on. The Egyptian guys always have clothes on, but not the Greek guys. So what that meant, of course, was that the Greeks had to make this part up. that part, they were on their own. They didn't have any model to go by from the Egyptians. And so some aspects are lifelike, but they also are very fond of patterning. So this, which John Pedley made us all learn, was the epigastric arch. So I have never forgotten it. And the hip bones are just just patterns. To say nothing of the knees. The knees are actually my favorite. Look at the knees. Like, what is this? This is and the ears are weird too. All right, so here's the back of the New York kouros, and you can see also on the back that you can see the remains of the original block that was cut, and you can see the rest of his very cute Tootsie Roll hair with its little fringe on the bottom. So these guys are very impressive. Now, this grid that the Greeks learned from the Egyptians had as the key element of the key. I'm actually really tired, and I can't even figure out what word I want here. What word do I want? When you've got one part of a whole. Yeah, something like that. Well, the head is in the Egyptian grid 1/6 of the body. It's 1/6 of the body. And in the New York kouros, the head is 1/6 of the body. But the head is not really 1/6 of the body. I mean, not in real life. In real life, the head is more like 1/7 of the body. So, apparently very soon after the New York kouros was carved, the few people who were interested in carving more of these kouroi stood around and looked at it and said, there's something wrong here. And there were two approaches that could be taken, and both were taken. One approach is to just make the entire statue bigger so that you could, if you have a 7-foot body, then the head would be more or less the right proportion. And the other approach would be to make the head smaller. In other words, one approach would be to stick with the grid and just make the whole thing larger, and then the other approach would be to immediately start to modify. The Tenea kouros, which you read Andy Stewart's nice article about, is the sculptor of the Tenea kouros took the latter approach. The Tenea kouros head is 1/7 of its body, and he is about 5'6", I think, to the Tenea kouros. And it's easy to see when you compare these two how that has been modified, and you can also see that the Tenea kouros has ladyfinger hair. All right, this is a cool chart that shows how the kouroi were modified. All the kouroi are not actually the same size, but what John Boardman, who conceived of making this, what he did was had an artist redraw all the kouroi to the same scale. And in so doing, you can see that there is an early clump of, these are all big, and so the sculptors followed the pattern of making the whole statue bigger, but very soon, by the middle of the 6th century, what happened was the heads got smaller. So you can see in this whole lineup, the heads got smaller. Here's another one of the early ones, the Sunion kouros, 580. He is, get this, almost 10 feet tall, 9 feet 10 inches, the Sunion kouros. He is one of two that was found in a pit at a sanctuary here on Cape Sunion. And there was a sanctuary here to Poseidon beginning in the around 700 BCE, late 8th, beginning of the 7th, or late 7th, beginning of the 6th century, 700. And the Sunion kouros, the two Sunion kouroi were dedications there almost at once. This temple that you see here right now, that temple wasn't there then, but there was another structure that was there. This temple is a replacement for it. So so here you have this guy, and another feature that is a significant difference between the Greek kouroi and the Egyptian kouroi is that, in part because they don't have any clothes on, they have no attributes. Attributes meaning something that would identify them. They have no attributes. And that's clearly on purpose, as you learn from reading Andy Stewart's guide. So there's deliberately no identification, specific identification of this figure, which leads you to the obvious question: who is this guy? Who is this guy? So come up with 3 possibilities for who this guy is. 3 possibilities. You can have a little chat. Okay, all the way in the back. Give me an idea.
We're thinking because it's larger and simple, but it's a representation of Apollo.
So Apollo is one idea. Apollo's one idea. Give me another idea.
Well, we were talking about how it could not be Apollo. Also.
Okay.
In one of the articles, they said that.
Wait, don't say why it can't be Apollo. We're going to have pros and cons in a second. Give me another idea of who it could be.
Well, they also found. Well, since this is at the temple of Poseidon,
Maybe it could be Poseidon, right? Okay, Apollo, Poseidon. Who else could it be?
It could be an idealized form of mortal.
An idealized mortal. So not a mortal, but not a specific individual. Because he's 10 feet tall, right? That's weird. Probably they weren't that tall. so a super guy. A guy, but a super guy. Okay, that's another possibility. What's another possibility? Back there in the stripes. Kouroi were used for grave markers, but not him, because he wasn't marking a grave. He was found inside the temenos of the sanctuary of Poseidon. So he stood originally in the sanctuary, not over a grave. You're right that kouroi were sometimes grave markers, but not he. he not?
Could be built as maybe some sort of eternal guardian / religious figure, symbolic of.
Yeah, could maybe he would be some sort of some guardian or somebody who had a function in the sanctuary, a priest or guard, something like that. Hand him back.
Yeah, I was thinking it could be, but then I'm like, well, if it's a temple,
He is the deity of the sea. So that would be a problem with this guy being Poseidon. Is that your point?
no, I'm saying that it could be.
Could be Poseidon. All right. So we have Apollo. We have Poseidon. We have we have somebody, but not just anybody. Some super somebody person, but not with a specific role. And we have somebody with a specific role, a priest or a guardian or something like that. Okay. Why not Apollo?
One of the articles, I don't remember which one it was, I think it was the second one, they had found paintings on faces, I think, where there was a Apollo, but he picked out one of the belts that kouroi had, which they was Apollo, but that's the belt.
Right, so you remember that. So this is in Andy Stewart's article. He was talking about how some early sculptures, both little and large, are belted, and they are specifically Apollo. And what's the argument then for why the belt? Why the belt? I mean, it's not to hold something up, huh? It's not practical whatsoever. Why the belt?
Well, they said the fact that they had to have specific them to make by itself.
Yeah, that's exactly what Andy's argument is. Andy's argument is, well, the belt is distinguishing. Put the belt on purpose. The belt says this is somebody else other than somebody not else. And therefore, if you don't have the belt, maybe they don't mean that it's that this guy is that identification. In other words, the lack of attributes is on purpose. That's his main point. The lack of attributes is on purpose. And that's probably why most people now don't think, not that this means that in 25 years there won't be more arguments the other way. As he says, the pendulum of scholarship is never still. But right now what people think the argument is, well, when there's no attribute that's on purpose, and that means that it's not a deity, because a deity would have to have something identifying. If it's Apollo, these Apollos would have a belt. Poseidon would have a trident, actually. We don't have any depictions of Poseidon this early. So probably not Apollo, probably not Poseidon, because how would you know? How would you know? And so could be some random individual, some special individual, and in effect, we have an analogy for this kind of thing today. Has anybody ever seen this perfume? This is an old ad. This came out. I don't know if this perfume is made anymore. It came out in the 80s. But this fellow, who is this guy? You know, actually, I think it's very funny and interesting. And I wish I could have been present at the discussions, the marketing people discussions for how they were going to advertise this. Why does he have his back to us? Why? Why does he have his back to us? Why do you think? This dude. Mr. White. Why? Can't see his face. And so, if you can't see his face, he's every man. Right. Right. But a particularly nice specimen. Well, that's part of the point. Right. Right. That is part of the point. That's the back of the Sunyan kouros, one of the Sunyan kouroi. He's the crinkle-cut French fry hair guy. Yeah. So the kouroi, this is how I think of the kouroi. I think of the kouroi as the male models of the 6th century BCE. Who are they? Well, they are real guys, but not just any guys. They're super good guys, super good looking guys. Nice bodies, nice face, nice hair. And that's who the kouroi are. They are idealized, but they're real. They're an idealized, real person. They are essentially the best we can be. That's what they are. And in that, they are analogous to male models who are frequently anonymous hunks. Right? That would be one way that would be a synonym today for a lot of male models. It would be an anonymous hunk. But sometimes today you don't get an anonymous hunk advertising something. You get a real hunk. I mean, right? You get somebody that's recognizable. He turns his face to you. He's a celebrity, somebody that you know. Whoever that famous guy was who advertised somebody's underwear. Who was that? It was Calvin Klein. Yeah, right, him. So part of the point was that he was who he was, right? He wasn't an anonymous person. He was a real person. Well, it's the same with the kouroi. It's the same thing with the kouroi. So these two guys, so this is the Sunyan kouros. He's a guy, kouros, who was found at Sunyan. That's all we know. He doesn't have a name. He doesn't have any attributes, doesn't have anything identifying him. These two, we know who they are. How do we know? Because we have this awesome story told in Herodotus. Cleobus and Biton were of Argive stock. So what's this site? Where are we? Right, the Argive Horion. Cleobus and Biton were of Argive stock. They had great bodily strength. Both had won prizes in the athletic contests. Does this not sound modern? So this story is told about, so that's the part that sounds modern, not the next part. This story is told about them. There was a festival of Hera in Argos. Their mother, who was a priestess, absolutely had to be conveyed to the temple, but their oxen had not come back from the field in time. So the youths took the yoke upon their own shoulders, drew the wagon, with their mother riding atop it, traveling 5 miles until they arrived at the temple. What good boys. When they had done this and had been seen by the entire gathering, that's an important point. It's not just that they did something good. See what Herodotus remembers to remark here, makes pains to remark here, that they had been seen by everybody. It's like the tree falling in the forest. If you do a great deed and the public doesn't see it, it a little bit doesn't count. So they've been seen by the entire gathering, and then, this is so Greek, their lives came to an excellent end. This is good, so that way you don't have a chance to ruin your reputation for the rest of your life. You've done something great, and then that's it. The Argive men congratulated them on their strength. The Argive women congratulated their mother for having borne such children. She was overjoyed, so she stood before the image of the goddess and prayed that the goddess might grant the best thing to her children. Cleobus and Biton. They sacrificed and feasted. The youths lay down in the temple, went to sleep, and never rose again. Death held them there. Yay! That's a good thing. This is a happy story. And the Argives made and dedicated at Delphi statues of them as being the best of men. This is the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi, And this is where Cleobis and Biton were found. Those two statues of Cleobis and Biton were found at the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi. And they have on their base a partial inscription. We don't have the full name of the artist, something Medes, Polymedes maybe, we guess, made these apoiasa. And he is Argaios. He is from Argos. So, just like Marky Mark, Cleobis and Biton were specific famous individuals. And the kouros concept could be expanded to include not just anonymous guys, but real guys. And these statues, this same statue type, was used for both. So it's not the individual statue type that's necessarily meaningful, since the same type is used for both. This guy, who is called the Anavisos kouros because he was found near the town of Anavisos in Attica. All right, so we have completely anonymous super guys. We have actually famous celebrity guys, 6th century BCE Greek celebrity guys. And then we have something very touching. The Anavisos kouros, as many of you noted, a lot of these kouroi are grave markers. The Anavisos kouros was a grave marker, and here is what it says on his gravestone. Stay and mourn for Croesus. So actually he has a name. We call him the Anavisos kouros, but we really should give him a name because he has a name. His name is Croesus. Stay and mourn for Croesus by his monument, he now dead, from fighting among the first rank, violent Ares destroyed him. So he was a soldier. He was a warrior. And he died. And he received this. So he is a regular guy. Not a super guy, not a sort of eternal, ambiguous, wonderful guy like the Sunian kouroi. Not somebody who was famous by dint of some deed like Cleobis and Biton. He is just a regular guy who comes from a family wealthy enough to be able to make a statue for him. He is the 6th century version, in a way, of this guy. What do these two have in common? They were both warriors. And it is noted that they are both warriors. Prestigious. They're both upper class. What makes them upper class? They had enough money. Land. They had enough land. Land was the source of money. Yeah. What's the obvious difference? Do not tell me that one's a pot and one's a statue. What? Contextually, what's the big difference? Contextually, or my favorite word, what is the most salient difference between these? Yeah. Right. The pot was buried. The statue was meant to be seen. It's not just the guys, it's also the girls. This young lady, whose name is Phresyclea, because it's written on her base, was found in a pit during road construction in rural Attica, right next to a kouros. There must have been a high-class family cemetery right in this area, and there was a kouros on one person's grave and a kouroi on another, and the kouroi is Phrasyclea. Phrasyclea has an inscription. Marker of Phrasyclea, I shall forever be called kouroi, meaning maiden, unmarried. The gods allotting me this title in place of marriage, Aristion of Peros made me. Similarities between these. Similarities between these. All the way in the back. In the black. Yes, they're both very large. Yes, they're both monumental.
Both have like a lot of detail work to them.
Yes, they both have. They are elaborate. They are elaborately adorned and decorated. Tell me something else.
They're both.
They are both grave markers. Same use.
Amphora it's a belly amphora, so it's demanded.
They are both for women. Right. That's interesting. It tells you that women still are worthy of expensive grave markers and were carried with them the class of their family.
It shares the same geometric.
Oh, that's true. That's true. This meander. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Greeks really liked that pattern. That is true. And they were both.
Both women were obviously upper class. Put in.
Yes, and on display. Right, on display and visible. Here, because they can now, she gets a specific name. This is certainly for a specific woman. Anybody who would have seen it in 8th century Athens would have known who this was for. We don't know who it was for because they weren't writing quite yet. So this lady who is on the bier in this scene is just as specific as Phrasyclea, but we just don't have her name. But as soon as the Greeks could write, when they used these for grave markers, they started to be labeled. Remember Nicandry? This is similar to Nicandry in that her name, or Croesus, the Anavisos kouros, stay and mourn for Croesus, marker of Phrasyclea, their specific names are put front and center. So there are a few developments in Greek culture now in the 6th century, but they are not differences of quality. They're really differences of quantity. That is, there's an ability to do more things, but there are the same goals. So, thinking about what this culture now, Greek culture in the 6th century BCE, holds as important. What are the messages that, just to emphasize to you that in some ways this is a valid question of these. We don't do anything like this now. You do not go into a cemetery and see a monumental figure, nude or otherwise, of the individual who is buried. So, whatever messages these two monuments are sending, coupled with their inscriptions, we do something differently now. So, what are the messages that these two monuments are sending? You have 2 minutes to come up with, what do I have down here? 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 big ones. Yeah, well, yeah. I had to drive Rebecca to school this morning, and I have to wait to go get her. And yeah, around 3 o'clock this morning, I was thinking maybe this wasn't really such a great idea. What is she holding? She's holding a flower, I think. Is she holding a flower? I can't actually see from here. Yeah, I think she's holding a flower in the tips of her fingers. Okay. Tell me something, somebody, or I start pointing. They want people to know who they were. The Greeks had a word for this. They called it kleos. We transliterated K-L-E-O-S. We translate it, if you just have to give it one word, we would translate it as fame. But fame doesn't really do it. Kleos is repute, reputation, as in your reputation lives on or your reputation precedes you. Your name is known. Kleos. Very key Greek concept. And yes, how do we know? Because unlike, so this all-purpose form, the standing female, she with clothes, or the standing male, he without, when it is deployed as a grave marker, gets a name. Why? The name is like the belt. Why did those guys need a belt? Because otherwise they would be like any other guy. It wouldn't be a specific guy. That's a little bit of the problem with this all-purpose form. It's a good thing, but it's also difficult because then when you want to use it for a specific person, you have to indicate that. So that's what's indicated on these grave markers with, and that's exactly what you get in the very first line is their name. Why? Kleos, so that their name will not be forgotten. What else? Tell me something else. You with the hat. Physical beauty. Yeah. A beautiful form, a beautiful face in proportion, tall, strong, and most importantly, young. Now there's something that we can all have no trouble identifying with from our culture to theirs. This is a youth-oriented culture, youth and beauty. Actually, you know what? We don't have any idea how old Croesus is when he dies. And maybe he was the young guy, but not necessarily. We don't have any idea. Now, for Hezekiah, it's true. She dies before she gets married. We know that from her inscription. So she probably was young. But Croesus, not necessarily. If you ever look at, probably most of you do not do this, but if you ever look at obituaries, the kinds where you get the little picture, very frequently there will be a picture of somebody not aged 74 or whatever when they died, but young. Especially common with guys from the military, I notice. See them in their service photos. Maybe because, and I always wonder whose choice that is, but because maybe that was at their best. That's what they felt.
Wouldn't the inscription for Croesus indicate that he died in battle?
It does indicate that he died in battle, but it doesn't mean that he was young. Yes, it absolutely means that he dies in battle. Certainly.
Well, then conversely, how does that tell us that she was in battle back then? I mean, what would have happened?
Yeah. Well, it's less likely. It's less likely that if she was just too old, that she would have had this sort of inscription, and she probably would have been called kouroi. I mean, she's actually her inscription. It uses this word, so we don't just call her a kouroi because.
Another label like I just.
Yeah. There actually isn't one of those labels in Greek. Maybe because there weren't wasn't this whole category thing. Yeah, okay. So yes, young and beautiful, and the Greeks had a word for that too. And that word was arete. And if you write it in English, it's arete. And if you give it a one-word translation, the translation is excellence. But again, like with kleos, arete is more than excellence. It is a package deal, a big package, a big box with a bow. And the arete box is all that stuff that goes together. Similar to how in the United States we used to think of celebrities. That was then, back in the day. Back in the day, celebrities were the perfect package. They were perfect, they were beautiful, they were generally happily married, they were always straight. So if you were Rock Hudson, you were straight anyway, because that was part of the package. The package had a whole bunch of aspects to it, and so does arete. And youth and beauty are part of it. Okay, what else? So we have kleos, and we have arete. What are the other messages?
They wanted to show off that they were wealthy.
Yes, display. Yeah, this is absolutely about display. This is a little bit like performance art, because these inscriptions talk to you. They engage you. This is communicative. This is not a solo performance. These are part of a community still, part of the community that involves you. In that way, they are immortal. As long as they stand there with their conversational inscription for you to interact with, they live on. What else? What else did I get? Immortal, kleos, arete, performance art. That was it. That was what I got. Okay, so did anybody get any? Do you get any more? So now you have some more words to add to the pile of cultural aspects. And would anybody by chance here, anybody in this class, go to or see the opening ceremonies of the Athens Olympics? Can you believe it? Gosh. Yeah. So, kleos, time, arete, immortality, 2004, Athens. Unbelievable. Okay. Thanks. Bye. See you Thursday. Isn't that funny?